And through marketing and through the sell, as you discuss, it becomes really difficult to stay connected to what's inside of me, to stay receptive to a dialogue that you and I might have. Even Tracy and I might disagree, or the audience might disagree with Tracy or I, or with, amongst themselves. And Tracy and I think, have each had experiences on social media where, either we got disconnected or we perceive that maybe someone else got disconnected from this receptive zone. And so I think, I can go on and on about it, but some of the key ways that this comes into play is through a somewhat maybe addictive oriented culture where, in order to deal with this, we end up going kind of all or nothing. This shows up through food. It shows up through our consumer culture. It shows up in ways that we're not able to stay connected to ourselves and lead a balanced life, or have a balanced moment even necessarily, that we're kind of blindly seeking, or through our devices. We've talked a lot about that, Tracy and I, addiction to computers and, cell phones, staying connected to ourselves. Both, I think it really, when we talk about how do we be receptive to someone else and their opinions, we're also talking about the way we're receptive to ourselves and being able to be in a state of vulnerability. There's not a lot of this getting modeled in our culture, except in the, big swelling community of mindfulness. But even I really struggle with this. So I don't know. What do you think, Tracy?
Yeah, I think that you're bringing up some really interesting points, Molly. And I think what we've really been able to articulate is that when ourselves are different from one another, what does that do to ourselves? And I think what I'm experiencing more and more is that when we experience a self that's different than our own, we tend to have a threat response, right? That there's some kind of integrity of the self that gets called into question. If I actually am different than you, does that mean that myself still exists? And so this is going to get real woo-woo psychobabbly here, but there is this potential to feel a certain kind of annihilation. Do I even exist if somebody else is so radically different? And then when you add politics into the mix that are so completely intertwined with our sense of survival, then it becomes doubly tricky. But if we go back to my original intention, which is, yes, and this is why this particular conversation is the most important, because there's so much at stake in our politics and the policies that we produce, that we do need to learn how to tolerate our own sense of self and different selves in order to actually produce productive public policy. So this is something that I am super interested in. And then this is where, to me, psychotherapy is an additive to this discussion, because I think psychotherapy directly helps people tolerate their sense of self in the face of a different self.
Right. And what comes up around the unknown, I think, as we were talking about earlier, that, when something comes up inside that I don't know how to identify this experience, whether it's vulnerability in myself or difference in someone else, it's, we don't know how to stay within that experience.
Yeah. So when Molly and I were sort of prepping for this conversation, we had some fun conversations about our nervous system. And, depending on the lens that you look through, I tend to take an attachment lens and a sort of traumatology lens. I do have a bias here. I do believe that a regulated nervous system that's operating in a particular window of tolerance, so that our prefrontal cortex, which is that part of the brain that allows us to stay empathically attuned to another person, that regulated nervous system actually allows us to tolerate that we're a self and then the person sitting across from us is a self, so that we can actually be in a stance of communication.
Yeah.
Yet, I have not seen very many models of regulated political conversations. They escalate so quickly. And I can't tell you how many emails I received. We sent out a mass email yesterday through Psyched, and I had several friends and even some psychologists email me with some snarky comments like, you really think that you can be reasonable with somebody that's, you know, from this political persuasion or that one? And I
Oh,
said, yes,
fun.
we must.
Great. I love that challenge. Because yes, I think so.
So say more. Why do you think so, Molly?
Well, I think, one of the things I've been practicing, and it really shows up in my work as a psychotherapist as well, is not needing immediately to correct someone to a viewpoint that is my own. That I can be patient with someone, and not all the time, of course, because I'm not perfect. And I know you're not perfect, Tracy, so we all probably fumble in this area. But, I don't feel like I have a need to tell someone they're definitively wrong anymore, even if maybe a part of me is believing that they are. I think for me, the highest goal is to show respect. Again, even if I have some fantasies that come up that are anything but respectful about, what I want to do or say, my ultimate goal, and I think a lot of people share this deep down, is that we can come away with a disagreement feeling kind of even better about ourselves. Not that we ever agreed necessarily on the content, but that we reach some kind of agreement about the way we're going to respect each other mutually. That we don't have to come up with the concrete answer together. I mean, that's kind of a way of not answering, but that's actually really part of my core belief about it. What do you think?
Well, if I can reflect back to you, what I'm hearing you say, it's like you're talking about dancing the gray in a way.
And I think for me, humor really underlies it, and the ability to poke fun of someone and to show that I'm willing to be made fun of. You can call me a communist or whatever. I mean, I'm not a communist, but I want to be made fun of too. And that we're probably, if we're taking ourselves so seriously, we're probably not going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to the next slide. As you know, Molly, I am sort of becoming addicted to listening. If I'm the ultimate reductionist, I am reducing the entire world down into this one thing. And that is the thing that I don't see happening, is this listening component. There's so much telling. And I loved what you just said about the need to be right and the inability to be made fun of. Because
it's one of my worst pet peeves.
When people are like that.
Yeah, when people don't want to be made fun of.
Yeah, right. And how do you think that relates to listening?
Well, I think when we're taking ourselves too seriously, we don't have that receptive space inside. We're not receptive even to changing our mind, even if it's unlikely about a particular subject. We should be open, in fact, to being malleable. If we always know that we're right about something, then, we live in a dynamic world, so things are always going to change. And I really think humor plays into that. So, the ability to not hold on so strongly to anything that it becomes a kind of death of a relationship, whether it's, the colleague with her Facebook friend and, long-term childhood friend, or, me with my husband. We can't hold this death grip on ourselves and our opinions, and it applies to everything. We're really not just talking about politics here, but anything to do with our kind of core belief system, but our ego. It goes wild, I think, with where, the associations we can make to it, but hopefully that was tangible.
So it really sounds like this egoic pursuit of being right gets in the way, in your mind, of good listening.
And I think that's part of what we learn in this culture. I mean, if we look at some of our political figures, there's a lot of definitive rhetoric that this is absolutely the way. I'm not going to entertain someone else's way. And we see it in marketing, as you alluded to as well, through the sell, that, this is what it's going to take. There really isn't a lot of gray area for us to kind of dwell in, and that kind of trickster zone where we can poke fun of ourselves and just kind of the situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Yeah. So if listening is the magic elixir, I think that it would be really relevant to sort of talk about what is good listening. And I'll get back to the previous slide in a second. On the left is a picture of Brooke Dooley. This is from last Thursday on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. And she is sitting in what I think is a very good listening posture. I would make her take her sunglasses off.
They look good though. Yeah.
They look good. But she's open, and I could also feel it as well. So there's something visual that you see here, the way her shoulders are set, the way her jaw was actually relaxed and she was smiling. Both of her feet were on the ground. And she was talking to somebody that had actually quite different political views. We actually had some interesting political conversations last week. And, you know, I think that what we really got to the heart of was this capacity to have somebody feel seen. And what I'm aware of as whether we're citizens or as therapists, because I have had many, many therapists with a particular political point of view really come out and attack people as stupid or pathological for not having the same political stance as they do, and that this candidate is a narcissist, so therefore there's something pathological about you. What that actually does is it creates a kind of attachment dysregulation. It creates non-relationship. And I actually fundamentally believe a functioning democracy is based on relationship. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be, you know, hanging out, having backyard barbecues together, but it does mean that we can actually come to compromise. We can each understand where the other is coming from. So, you know, without reading every single possible thing, you can look, you guys are all readers, read the slide, but I want you to just for a minute, imagine the person in your life that you disagree with the most. And notice if you take on a stance in your body of wanting to prove them wrong, what happens? Ooh, I already feel it. Just track it. Now imagine what you see over there. What's possible now? And what's not possible? Are you in your core ethic as a human in this relational stance of needing to be right? Okay. So take a breath and de-roll. Let's try something different. Same person. Okay. Ooh, that takes a second to shake off, doesn't it? Right? I mean, I can already feel it in my nervous system. Take on the stance of being completely interested in what is underneath everything that this person believes. And that you're not even interested in whether you believe anything that comes out of their mouth is right or wrong, but you're deeply interested in who they are and what shaped them. Ooh, that made a shift in me. Feel that. I'm deeply interested in who you are and what has shaped you and what has shaped your political views. Okay. So this is just a posture that I believe is a prerequisite to not only having good political conversations, but I actually think this is a posture that's a prerequisite to being a good human. If you know, good being relative, I hate that word, but it certainly is a stance of humanity to take. Do you have more you want to say on this one, Molly?
Well, I'm tempted to kind of reflect a little of my experience. Do you want to go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I noticed that what came up for me in the first part of the exercise was just a really kind of mental space. I'm not really maybe even feeling very much, or I'm not in my feelings. I'm not aware of what my feelings are. I'm not aware of a really kind feeling, especially, I noticed. And I'm kind of dissociated. It's kind of the lines running through my mind are you're not doing this, and you know what I'm demanding in a sense from you, this person who I'm in a disagreement with. And it's a very locked position. It's kind of, I'm not really processing very much in my body, but, I know I said I was in a mental space, but I'm not really processing very many thoughts. There's not really a lot of wiggle room. But then in the second part of the exercise that you guided us through, I really started thinking about what is this person's feeling state, what led them to have all of these experiences that would be so triggering for me. And I kind of want to get there and speak more to that person rather than, this locked debate that we're in.
And what do you think it feels like as a human? Which conversation is more gratifying in terms of just your humanity, the first or the second?
Well, of course, the second, right? Right. I think a lot of people might say it's the first because they get something out of it, or they, again, if we go back to kind of culturally what's modeled to us, that's definitely true, kind of take all, winner take all. But I don't think we're going to get, as you said, in a democracy, we're not going to get anywhere really with that. And we've seen a lot of that stalling, I think, politically already.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we're not truly understanding the intent of another, or not engaging in a way that understands someone else's perspective. I think politically, politicians anyway, let's kind of point the fingers at them, there's a lot of locks on progress, on policy. A lot of it comes down to the ability to stay right, or to show our party that we're doing the right thing, when behind closed doors, we know that a lot more, cooperation happens. So,
yeah.
But I think what gets shown to us, again, thinking culturally about it, the symbols that we learn are very black or white. Someone's a Democrat or a Republican, even though there's lots of shades all around and in between. That's not what gets shown to us. We're shown these two options. It's very all or nothing. And I think it really starves us for the ability to be more complex, but also to hold the kindness towards humanity that you're alluding to. That's really, going to be fundamental to our progress in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what actually started this whole conversation is that Molly and I have never actually met in the flesh. Which is kind of funny. It's fun seeing your face. But we've worked on a few projects together. And because Molly has a more politically focused bent, I think that we sort of started to tribe a bit over Facebook and having some political views. And in the process of posting something on my own Facebook page that was political in nature, not inflammatory, it was sort of talking about the pitfalls of capitalism. Actually not a former high school friend, a very good high school friend who has stayed a friend. I say former just because I don't get to see her that much. Said, look, that's classless to post anything at all about politics on Facebook. And we wondered about that together. And so we conducted some research, just a general research project. The way we collected the research is we ran some Facebook ads. We ran them nationally, not just the Bay Area. And then I did a lot of posting in both Republican and Democratic leaning news feeds. So like going to the Bernie Sanders wall, the Hillary Clinton wall, the Kasich wall, the Trump wall, and posting in the comment section, hey, will you take our poll? And these were the results of how people feel about talking about politics on social media. We had 129 anonymous respondents, certainly not a representative sample, but it was interesting. And
good sample, yeah.
Molly wrote a really great article that you can check out on the Huffington Post. Some of you actually got to this webinar through her article that sort of talks in detail about this debate. But I think that it's really the background for kind of how we arrived here, yeah? Do you have more you want to say about this data?
No, I just find the data really exciting, especially, knowing that you really reached out to kind of everyone here, not just people who are nodding with us,
Yeah.
politically, because that wouldn't be very interesting. So I just find it totally exciting. If our guests have a chance to look at the slide, that it's obvious that most people felt we should go there. We should find a way to have these discussions, even if we're not good at it, even if we're terrible at it, and maybe a lot of us are, including me, but that it's actually, I think what this says is that fundamentally we really want to respect each other and to hold this kindness and compassion, that one of our ideals is really to listen. Even if we don't really know how to do it, we want to.
Yeah. I'm curious to ask you the question, which piece of data was the most surprising on this slide? Because I know which one was for me.
Why don't you tell me? Like, give me a moment here.
That I've been influenced by political posts of my Facebook friends.
That was surprising to me too.
I thought it was a pretty high percentage. It was 26.8%.
I know.
I know. That's more than I would have thought. I would have thought. Great.
Has that happened to you, Tracy? Have you been influenced?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have been influenced by, I had a very lovely political conversation with so I grew up in Southern California in Orange County. Most of my friends are voting for Donald Trump, and had really fruitful conversations with them about that.
I love it.
I don't know that I've been influenced in terms of how I'm going to vote, but I have been influenced by the way that they think about the world, especially those that are that have a really solid historical context and are able to articulate with great detail and data and kind of philosophical information why they're thinking the way they're thinking. I have been influenced by their thinking. Yeah. I haven't changed my vote based on some of those conversations, but I certainly have been. We have found points of connection.
Yes.
Points of connection, which has been really interesting.
Great. Yeah, I have too. I've also been influenced by, sometimes I think maybe, I don't know that I have a really good example ready, but I do feel like I've been influenced, and some of my positions on particular issues I think have been influenced. And, I'm probably not going to be voting for Trump in the primary, but I also, actually someone very dear to me posted something on Facebook about how, maybe he's really interested in making some structural changes. And at first I just I was guilty of breaking my own rules for having a healthy political debate on Facebook. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I came around to realize that she had done some research on this, that, we could go on or not about each particular candidate and how likely they are to adhere to any particular thing that they say. But I appreciated her, very detailed research into the topic. Yeah. And, you said earlier something about a barbecue. I want to have a barbecue with, I want to be at a barbecue where there's people who disagree with me and really come to understand, that's really what I want. That makes me feel that I'm in community, is when I'm with people, yes, who support and understand my position, but when we can come together and have this underlying celebration of here we are in something together, whether it's this barbecue or something bigger than that there's some, I understand who you are, because fundamentally we want the same things. We want to protect our children, we want to have a safe community for us and our relatives and maybe even people we don't know who aren't like us. Right.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think that you bring up a really good point, that we actually should aspire to being in community with people that are really different than us.
That's the ideal. Of course, we all falter.
Yeah. I think the other piece, I'm going to get real vulnerable here. I'm going to ask a question. You can not answer if you want. Have you ever unfriended someone for their political posts?
I don't think so. It's crossed my mind. But I didn't grow up in Southern California. I grew up in a very liberal area, Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was a lot even more liberal then when I grew up than it is now. And it's still considered liberal, and very progressive. But, so there's not a lot of people in my feed saying rah, rah, Trump, or there's not a lot of Republicans even, but I'm loyal to these friends. If they've shown something to me about that our relationship matters, that's more important to me than, the ability to click unfriend. I can unfollow someone, but I usually don't do that for political reasons. I'll do that for other reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in the one case where I did unfriend someone, I think it wasn't the content of the political post, but it was the content of the posts in general about if there's anybody, the general tone was, if you disagree with me, someone should get a gun and shoot you in the head, was one of the comments. And I went, ah.
In that case, yeah, that calls for, I think, unfriending.
I tried to have a conversation, and then that wasn't
Yeah.
about politics.
That's scary. That's scary. But I do want to add something here that's really important to me. And I don't know if you and I, how you and I disagree or agree on this particular topic. I know it came up before when we were working on the article, but yes, to me, fundamentally, the relationship is the most important thing, but neither am I going to back away from my passion about policy. And I think that's where liberals have really faltered in general is by being too permissive of policies or even cultural contexts of something that might arise, like the oppression of women in some societies or cultures. That's an area where I'm not probably going to be really flexible, but it's with the relationship that I want to, preserve something of the humanity, again, to use your word, that I don't want to throw away the relationship. That doesn't mean I'm going to sacrifice my politics.
It sounds like you're advocating for a really differentiated stance where in the listening, you also stay kind but clear in your speaking as well.
Yeah. We can have a good time, and it's not going to sabotage our ability to be friends and to, enjoy each other's company. Even if we're disagreeing, maybe we can enjoy an aspect of that.
Yeah, for sure. So I wanted to give a little sample. This is actually a real exchange between a friend of mine who actually is very much voting for Donald Trump. And he just invited me up to his house with his family last week. We are quite close. In fact, we exchange I love yous. Post number one is a comment from another friend of his in response to his pro-Trump post. I think post one is an example of a particular kind of response that doesn't inhabit that receptivity and listening stance that we were talking about earlier in the presentation. Okay. His response was to reply number one, all true, and he's still a better, more moral person than Hillary Clinton. I would never vote for a socialist Democrat. And then my response was number two, I'm voting for Hillary. I feel differently. Help me understand what you want government to provide or what this collective agreement called government is. I say this with zero malice or aggression and uninterrupted curiosity. Help me see it compassionately through your eyes. I want to.
Nice.
Okay. I wanted to actually give an example of how to do this online, because when we were talking about listening a few slides back, we were talking about listening face to face. There is this other component to listening online. There's no body there.
Yeah.
There's no facial expression. There's no tone of voice. So getting locked into depersonalizing the other is so easy to do on social media. And it is the plight of social media. And I like social media, but I have to, I did spend many years in a sales career where I had to use technology to create a personal relationship with someone. So I think I have, I've got some skills I've got some years of practice using technology in a relational way. I don't think that we are natural at this though. How can I actually use feeling words? How can I still hold an open body posture? All of those listening stances that we were talking about, actually, I believe, have to be true while we're typing in our reply.
Absolutely.
And it's harder when we're typing in a reply. It's a mechanical stance. Our fingers are on a keyboard. We've moved way up into our left brain, kind of our sort of procedurally learned associations with what it means to be in front of a computer, sort of promote disembodiment, disengagement. There's no person over there. And what I'm here to say is there is a person over there. There's actually a real person over there. And how do we remember to do that? It's actually by going back a few slides, looking at what a listening stance really represents from an embodied perspective, and actually holding that stance while you're surfing social media, while you're surfing social media. And gosh, I have to say, I don't care if I'm not saying this because I think you should be a good girl or a good boy or be nice. It's also better for your own health. Because if you're getting ratcheted up, disembodied, and aggressive on social media, your heart rate goes up. You take years off your life. So I'm in this moment, I don't even care if it's about being kinder to the other. It's also kinder to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a way that, as you were saying, we don't imagine the other as a person. I think we cease to become a person in that moment too. As you said, there's a kind of routine we have around our laptop or our cell phone that involves kind of like getting really sucked into it. And, we become a kind of troll in that. For me, just if I could offer something that comes to mind immediately, I do, people always say, a lot can be misinterpreted through text. And I think that's true, but I think a lot less can be misinterpreted than we might think. I think we can maintain a gentle tone, and that just by staying patient and not getting sucked into the reactivity, which oftentimes people unconsciously are wanting to provoke from us, there's a way that we can actually, through this disconnected realm of social media, even model and calm someone else's nervous system down. We can talk about the neuroscience of that. It's still going to take 20 or 30 minutes once someone's amygdala is on overdrive. But I do think we can do this in a disembodied way. It's not ideal. I don't want us to, live only through social media. But I think just as we do it in real life, it can happen here too.
Yeah, I think that's I love what you just said, because this is where I'm going to get really pie in the sky, like dreamer, change the world, as I do. But I think by having healthy, constructive, attuned, relational, pragmatic, humorous, egoless, curious, political conversations, that I actually think we heal people and we heal ourselves. I think it's a deeply healing endeavor. The other reason why I'm a huge advocate for this kind of conversation, and I will tell you where I get activated, is that I have so many therapist colleagues who are mean about the opposite persuasion. And sometimes I'm mean too. But as I feel my reactivity to their posts, I'm like, wait a minute, but we're actually, sort of advocating for a tuned relationship. And I certainly don't say that therapists have got the corner on the market of healthy behavior. It's usually quite the opposite. And I do think that with a little bit of effort and a little bit of thought, therapists have done a lot of extra work on how to be in very difficult conversations. And I haven't seen them necessarily putting the same thought into how they're having political conversations. So let's translate all that good training at having difficult conversations into difficult political conversations on Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen something similar.
Absolutely. I think, a lot of us as psychotherapists are drawn to the work as wounded healers ourselves. And so we show up in our professions as kind of these, highest, most evolved selves that we've cultivated in one arena. And then we're also prone to the knee-jerk reactions of all of our upbringing and, the attachment styles that were modeled to us before our own corrective therapy. So, yes, I think psychotherapists are just as fallible as everyone else. And I think that's one of the ways we can actually show our own clients, that we're imperfect, and it happens in the therapy room with our clients, and we're going to get through this together. We don't have to pretend that we didn't just make a mistake. We can discuss how it impacted us or, the client, and move on. And yeah, that's how we heal relationally.
Yeah. So I thought we'd do a little bit more practice. And Molly, I would love for you to maybe walk us through another exercise that might help us, because we did one already where we imagined the face-to-face person. How in our conversations we were talking about how can we not become a troll?
Yeah. So you want to
online? Yeah.
You want to do something, you and me? Or what kind of exercise?
Why don't we start with this? Why don't we use this?
What is this? I haven't seen it. Oh my God.
I thought they were maybe some memes that one might come across on.
Oh my God. This is great. Let me move them. I want to see all of these. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Tell me what you had in mind, Tracy.
Well, I'm sure that some people are having a reaction to one or two or all of these, as I am. This comes across my Facebook feed from somebody that I like, and I feel what's happening inside of me already.
Well, do you want to tell us?
You're dumb.
You're dumb.
I feel the judgment, I feel the judgment. And then as soon as I go there, there's a signal that goes off that, oh wait, you just got dysregulated.
Yeah.
So then usually what I feel next is sad.
Yeah.
It makes me sad.
Right. Yeah, I notice in myself that I'm kind of drawn to this Hillary one in particular, a vindictive old rich lady with a penchant for lying. There's something, that comes up for me, even though I'm not like a cut and dry Hillary supporter. I'm actually maybe more in favor of Bernie in the primary, that it does, I have this anger that comes up around people kind of. It seems to me that a lot is bleeding over into some kind of misogyny, and my first reaction is anger. But I think what's really mainly there for me is a lot of sadness that we would kind of, not just with Hillary, but at Trump or at Bernie, point the finger and do these character assassinations, which is what politics has become, and not just politics as we talked about, but just kind of our a whole way of relating we have rooted in consumerism, capitalism. It's very complex. But it's very sad to me that, we, as much as I might post memes myself, that we've become reduced to this finger pointing and this erasure of someone else's humanity.
Mm-hmm. So I have begun to respond to these kinds of memes. And some days the internal dialogue is, do I have the energy and can I stay centered and grounded if I enter into this conversation? So a good friend of mine posted the Hillary meme, and I responded and I said, ouch, right? I said, I'm voting for her. Sounds like we have really different views. Tell me why you feel this way. And so I invite a conversation. Now, most of my Facebook friends have a pretty clear idea that they're going to get into a conversation with me that isn't going to turn into an attack campaign. So usually I'd say 95% of the time they actually answer my questions when I ask like this, because they actually feel very safe with me. And they also know that it's not some kind of mental trick where I'm going to try to prove them wrong. I won't ask if I'm not genuinely curious. So I have to find my way to, if I'm really committed to this kind of political dialogue on social media, I do have to find my way to authentic curiosity.
Yeah.
Right.
It should be genuine. Yeah.
And it comes from a core need, right? So if we go back to some of the principles of, say, nonviolent communication that says, underneath these things, we all have these needs. I have this core need to be in community around politics. And so that would mean also around our political differences. So if I can arrive there, if I have the energy for it, if I feel safe enough with this person, I'm going to engage and I'm going to post something. Also, I'll know something about the person, so that might, sometimes I'll say something funny. My friend who I call Cowboy Greg, he's fine with me outing him here in town. He's a rodeo rider, very good friend, came to my wedding, and he posts things like this all the time, like, oh, Greg, and so we use the humor piece. And I'll say something like, I still love you. So that it's still modeling a certain kind of relationality. Sometimes I'll also post some data, and say, well, I really disagree, and this is why.
Yeah.
You're laughing.
No, I love it. I love it.
I'm
laughing because I think, you and I have already agreed that these are the ways we think we can get somewhere together. And so, to hear you say that is wonderful. I don't always feel like I have the energy to go that extra mile, but I do when it becomes very passionate for
Right.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the piece. I think that, I think for any folks that are sort of counterphobic like me that tend to lean into these kinds of conversations, to ask yourself how much energy you have to expend, because these conversations on the other side, you're not necessarily going to be met by somebody who is regulating their nervous system. You're not necessarily going to be met by someone who is receptive. And so knowing that ahead of time really helps you modulate, okay, I'm going to have to commit to staying grounded here and to using my voice. I will share a really lovely conversation, though, that I had with the same friend that I had shared that other Facebook exchange with earlier in the slide deck. I asked him, we had a continued conversation from my question, tell me what it is that you're expecting from government. And we had a really interesting conversation that his idea of government is that government should only protect the individual, that he does not believe in the communal aspect of government. The government is only to secure our borders and to ensure trade between nation states. And I said, oh, interesting. And I said, what do I believe? I said, I actually believe in both community and individualism at the same time.
Yeah.
I said, and then I said, forwarded, you said it's really important to speak your truth. And I said, I truly don't believe that if we aren't taking care of our community, that we can have a sovereign nation and protected borders, nor can we have trade. It will erupt into chaos. Leaving behind whatever philosophical ideas you have about democracy. And we had this really nice conversation. And then one of his friends joined in, and it never got aggressive. And his friend started to, and then I wrapped him with some curiosity, and he came in too. And he actually agreed with me. His point was, I might actually join you in your political views if I actually believed that big governance could actually deliver on their promises. But I think that the larger the government is, the less efficient it is able to deliver services. I said, well, that's an interesting point of view. And then I came back and I said, but I believe that that's because our system doesn't fund programs through to completion because we're so short-term focused. So, we want to deliver a particular common good. We can't deliver it in an efficient fashion because we fund it for 4 years, not for the 15 that we need to, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Nobody left the conversation feeling bad. We all left the conversation feeling really educated, really clear. I felt like and I said a deep thank you. I said, hey, I really appreciate it. And I think this is an important piece of how to close these conversations too, because these are attachments, right? Yeah. Our attachment system is getting activated. And what I said to both of these men is I said, I really appreciate that you engaged with me around our differences. And it was really great to hear what your stance is on this. And these are both men who are voting for Donald Trump.
Lovely.
It was great. Right? And we found some common ground. Let's move on to the next slide and see what we got. This is your slide because this was your idea.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, you want to skip the exercise we talked about, or should we?
No, we should do it.
You want to?
Yeah. I'm going to take these slides off and just stay right here.
Okay. So we haven't practiced this at all, so bear with us. But Tracy and I thought maybe there's a way we could.
Oh my gosh. I just remembered what we're going to do. Okay. We are going to be guinea pigs, and we are going to actually have a live political conversation around something that Molly and I disagree with. Right?
Let's try to disagree here. Really try.
Well, I mean, do you want me to?
Yeah.
Try to figure out something. We don't know each other well enough to know strongly what we disagree around.
I don't know how well this is going to go, but we did talk about maybe discussing, who we're supporting in the primary and just to model to our audience, what is it like to, stay grounded in yourself, in ourselves, and not get into the locked state of disagreement. Is there another example you think another kind of disagreement we should tackle?
No, I think that's
Okay,
good.
that works.
I think that's good. I'm going to turn off the screen sharing so everyone can see our little faces here, front and center. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm just curious to hear more. I think I know a little bit about some of your stance on supporting Bernie Sanders pretty staunchly, and I'm wondering how you arrived at that, because I'm not so sure. I'm leaning strongly in the Hillary direction.
Yeah. So, well, for me, I think, speaking back to your friend, was it the rodeo guy?
Cowboy Greg?
Cowboy Greg. Yes, what a great nickname. So I really think that, we emerged, we were born into these lives as communal beings that, we are, independent fiercely, most of us as we grow up, but we're interdependent, as you said. We evolved in communities. And for me, this shows up in politics in a really strong way. And having spent some time in Europe, I studied abroad. I've been there a few times in Western Europe, all over, experiencing what it was like to have socialized medicine. I went to the doctor once. I got sick, and just to, I lived in a host family, even experiencing what it's like with almost zero homelessness and a different, a mental illness just showing up in a different way there. And of course, it's just kind of a blanket statement for the purpose of our discussion. I really, became passionate early on in my teens about bringing those kinds of ideals here. Why can't we take care of everyone and, maybe have something of a free market? And to me, that's everything that Bernie stands for. So social democracy, we still get to vote. We're not told that, I'm going to become a doctor and you're going to, take out the garbage or whatever. We have autonomy in our lives, but we've also agreed collectively that we don't want anyone to be left behind. Of course, in our country, where many of us are a paycheck away from homelessness or bankruptcy, to me, I can't. Sometimes this is where I get stuck in disagreements and maybe my own trolling at times. I don't see how anyone doesn't see it that way sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's something, as I became a little disheartened with the Bernie versus Hillary polarity, I've backed away a little bit from it. But to me, it's Bernie. Whether or not he's the absolute best person, I'm not sure. But he's the one who really is bringing these ideals for the first time, I would say, or in a very long time anyway, back to our country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So first, I'm going to track what was going on in my body while I was listening to you. The first thing that began to happen is I could feel myself starting to do, I think women do this a lot, the Me Too, right? So I started to merge a little bit with you. I tried to find all the places that we had common ground, and I sort of lost myself in sort of what you were saying and like, okay, well, wait a minute, Tracy. And so then in the wait a minute, I took a breath and I sort of came back and felt the front part of my body again. I could see your face, and when you were talking, you were looking into the camera. So over here, my eye contact isn't with you, but when I was looking in your eyes. And so I had to come back and go, okay, well, wait a minute. Let's just, I learned this new trick this last weekend about pretending like there's hammocks under your eyeballs and resting your eyeballs back into their hammocks so that you're not hypervigilantly leaning forward and merging with the other person. So I was sort of taking a deep breath and feeling, okay, I'm actually a separate person than Molly. And I'm going to just I actually started to allow myself to relish getting to know you, is where I sunk in. I just went, oh, it's really lovely to sort of know her and see her and not sort of merge with her around this. Okay. And then once I did that and I gave more room to myself, then I started thinking. So then I went up into the left brain, like, oh, wait, okay, let's just stay here in the listening before I move on to what I want to say next, because I started to get caught up in, oh, what am I going to say? So it was a lot of sort of quickly saying, oh, wait, that can wait, So that all was happening inside of me while I was listening to you.
You've done a lot of work on yourself. Yeah. And yeah. I want to jump in, but I feel like maybe you have more to say.
I didn't know if you wanted me to sort of expose my political views or if we're still tracking the parallel process here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you've partly exposed that already, but
I did, didn't I?
and I noticed, Tracy, I wasn't expecting you. I mean, I thought for the sake of the exercise, you might kind of jump in with your counterpoints. And when you didn't do that, I noticed that I really softened too. And I found myself really curious to know, well, what is it that makes Tracy tick? I really had a felt sense that Tracy, she wants to know me. She's getting to know this really important part of myself. And that made me want to return the favor because I started to feel like, well, we haven't met in the flesh, but this is a kind of relationship we're building. It's as a professional relationship, and maybe it'll become more of a personal relationship. What is behind Tracy's motivation to vote for whoever, for Hillary or whatever? It's just when you softened in that way, even though we're not here in the flesh together, I think I just really wanted to kind of be with you, even if we're disagreeing.
Wow, that's really, I didn't even occur to me to think that there was I thought you were so much in your talking experience that you might not be aware of who I am over here. So that's really,
well, you surprised me. So it was
that's pretty cool. Huh. So did you hear that, folks? Actually listening makes the other person curious to hear you after they're done. That's kind of cool. Or maybe it's just Molly because, maybe she's a superstar.
Well, and I'm in my professional, capacity right now. So I'm not, this is my best self. I'm just going to own that right now. So I've been imagining how am I going to
always like this.
I'm like this 100% of the time, I should tell you. No, not at all. And so I wasn't, you caught me off guard. And I was ready for a kind of debate, and you modeled something different. And I think we can even do this in a Facebook comment or in a tweet or whatever. I think there's a kind of patience that really comes through our words. And it's probably unconscious when we're choosing our words. There's a lot of research to show that, language is actually something that happens before we really learn language, if that makes sense. We develop this internal pre-verbal dialogue, and then it gets translated into our verbal dialogue. But I think it's unmistakable the way this gets delivered, the way it comes across. I don't think there's a lot of, there's probably some room for misinterpretation, but there's not a lot of accident in the way things, our intentions get delivered, if that makes sense. Even if we're, maybe you alluded to this earlier now, I don't remember, but even if we're pretending to be open-minded, maybe in the conversation you and I had yesterday, I think this came up, we can pretend that we're being so open-minded, but we can do it in this false way where we're acting really high and mighty. Well, I'm really listening to you, and you're really wrong. You're wrong here, you're wrong there, you're wrong. It's not a genuine curiosity. I felt this genuine sense from you.
Yeah, it was really genuine on my end. I will, dovetail in this other listening project that I do so I can sell it. Classic American. But I will, we do this thing where there's, I think, a few people on that are listening right now that are part of Sidewalk Talk, actually. Thank you for being here. Cool. I've been doing this listening thing for so long that, you wrote a piece for Psyched a while ago on mindfulness. And I find that listening is relational mindfulness. It's practicing mindfulness in the relational field. So when you get really committed to it and you practice it more and more and more, the curiosity is genuine. And you actually get faster at making it genuine the more you practice it. But it actually, just like mindfulness practice, you kind of have to do it to reap the benefits. You kind of got to practice and actually commit to doing the relational mindfulness or the good listening stuff.
Yeah.
Have it really be authentic.
It's absolutely a practice. There's no real way to fake it. I mean, we can fake it one day, but if we're not training our minds, the neural pathworks really get established depending on our behavior. So if we're not practicing this, daily or near daily, and practicing can even be about imagining. I mean, there was some study, a really old study about imagining that you're playing basketball actually helps you play basketball. Then if you didn't set aside this time to, to be mindful about your intention, whether it's basketball or how we're going to engage in a political debate.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said earlier, I really want to come back to something you said earlier too, that I think there's a way of being in debate that just isn't good for us, that sometimes we know, and you said counterphobic, I think, I don't know if I understand that correctly, but some of us can gravitate towards a debate that we know isn't going to be healthy for us or the other person.
Yeah.
I don't want to suggest that we always should have political conversations on Facebook or social media, because that's not always best for us. Sometimes to regulate ourselves, we know that we need to step back. And you alluded to this before, but I think it's so important to preserve, if we're going to risk a relationship that's fundamentally important to us, or if we know we're not going to be safe, or even if we know we're going to make someone else unsafe, maybe those are times that we just want to hold our beliefs and take them to the voting booths, rather than get into something that's going to be really dysregulating for us, that's going to make us step outside the present moment and be really future oriented or past oriented, really in anxiety.
Yeah. I think you bring up good points. I'm aware that we're at our hour mark. That went by pretty quick. So everyone, I just wanted to sort of show, and I'm going to just do a quick screen share again. We're going to send an email out after this presentation to all of you that has a email address. It's not live yet, so don't send anything there yet. Called listen@sanfrancisco.com. That email is going to kick off an email to both myself and to Molly. And we actually want to challenge you all to listen once in the next 2 weeks. Lean into a conversation, but really dovetailing into what Molly's saying. One that you have the stamina for, you can stay regulated around, that's going to be healthy for you. But try it one time, and then we want to be here on the email side of things to hear how it went for you and to support you in making any tweaks. And I think the final takeaway that this conversation has really reminded me of is that my listening actually has an impact on having someone be curious about me. That was really a new discovery, and how disembodied and easy it is to objectify someone on social media. We just forget that there's another person on the other end. Do you have any takeaways that you want to leave with, Molly?
Yeah, well, my hope is that our audience, and that anyone who might listen to this after the fact as well, really does practice this. And whether, I really would love to hear some of the experiences, but I think, if we can imagine ourselves being vulnerable and not having to be right, that's really the key to progress and to, getting things done, but to being able to be in relationship with differences.
Well said. Well said. So thank you, everyone, for listening in. And for those that are going to watch the recording later, thank you for listening in. And we do hope that you'll take this challenge. We really are looking forward to hearing from you. And I will send you an email. Oh, also, we'll send some resources too. There are some other therapist colleagues of ours that do some really cool communication skills training, and then some other articles and research that we're going to send out as well in that email. So thank you, everyone. And we're going to just say goodbye.
Thank you.
How do I end the call? There we go.